why might a species be at risk of extinction? No surprise if they live in a very small area. Anything happens there, they're gone. And so you have vulnerability there. For example, there are a number of tiny snails that live primarily in spring areas, especially across the southwestern US. The area is largely dry, and so water snails have limited range, but in a wet area, with a spring, the snails can survive, and while they're stuck in that spring, they can't travel around particularly, so you get unique species in different springs. Something happens that spring, the snail's gone. How do they get there? Well, if we go back to Ice Age, cooler conditions, more rain, less evaporation, and you often had large lakes across areas that are now desert valleys. And so in those lakes, we could get the snails around, and now they're confined to these little small areas. Others might actually be able to travel underground. But at any rate, one small spring, vulnerable to any sort of pollution, or if we drain it dry to make pretty fountains in Las Vegas, or do other things that affect the spring, we may wipe them out. We also have species, obviously not true of teeny tiny snails in the spring, that require large areas. Typically these are large animals, such as larger birds and mammals, especially predators, because predator has to have enough area to roam around to find prey. And so if one tiger, say, requires, I'm just making up a number, let's say it requires 50 square kilometers of territory, then a preserve that's 100 square kilometers has room for 2 tigers. That's not doing a whole lot for your tiger population. Islands. Localized range, for one thing, and also being on an island, that probably means that this species has not dealt with the same range of predators and competitors and things like that that you have on the mainland. So invasive species or habitat change, things like that, island species can be quite vulnerable. Relatively low reproductive rate. If a species has only a few young per year, like our K strategist, they are not going to recover fast if something happens. For example, sharks. Most of them only have a few, or maybe even one baby per year, whether it's laying an egg or something closer to live birth is range for sharks. So if we go out and catch a whole bunch of sharks, it's going to take a long time to get enough babies to replace them. Specialized requirements, maybe places to breed, places to feed, and if anything happens to those particular areas, then they're in trouble. Lots of factors play in here. Land use, turning natural areas into farms and cities and things like that. Accidental and deliberate bringing of other species to areas. For example, the Stephen Island wren in New Zealand. Stephen Island is a rather small island, and it had been timbered. There was various human effect on the environment at the island, and a lighthouse was built there. Lighthouse keeper decided to have a cat, and the cat from time to time would bring in this little tiny dead bird that the cat had caught, and one or two of the birds got preserved and studied and turned out to be a distinctive bird species, and apparently the cat finished off all the birds that were left on the island. Not often that one cat does it, but invasive species can, whether by predation or competition or spreading disease, potentially wipe out other species. Changing climate, various stresses on organisms there, pollution, overexploitation. Say we're hunting or fishing for things too much, various ways that human use can wipe things out. Again, a lot of this, thinking about things long term. Is something going to last or not? A classic story, there was an island off Newfoundland, Canada, that had a large nesting colony of seabirds. And people discovered that the birds, if something happened to the one egg they would lay per year, the birds were able to lay one more after that. So you could have a potentially sustained egg harvest, go through, gather eggs, and then let the birds lay again and new ones grow. Now, that is putting some stress on the birds that might show some declines long term, but you're maintaining things somewhat. Instead, what people did was go through the island, smash all the eggs they could find across the whole island, and then when the birds relayed, go gather those up and sell them as fresh eggs to the market. Guess what? The bird populations declined. Duh, no baby birds. What do you expect's going to happen? When you use things up, they're gone. Oh, it seems obvious, but only if you're actually thinking, which people seem often not to do. Changing habitat, destroying where things would have lived. That's less range, less opportunity to survive. Another challenge is fragmentation of habitat. Okay, here's a little patch of wood still present. Is that enough for the species to live in? Maybe, maybe not. And okay, one individual can live there. One individual is not a breeding population. So you need a big enough habitat area for the species to be able to maintain its abundance. Too small and you see noticeable declines. You also have degradation of natural habitats, even if it's, say, still woods, but the main natural habitat would be around here before human action, whether it's the fire and cutting down, going all the way back to the first arrival of Native Americans, or the more extensive impacts of the European settlers. But even if something's still a forest, it may not be a nice natural forest. We have the impacts of pollution, of many invasive species, changes in climate, changes in water patterns. Over-harvest means that a natural habitat is not what it used to be. For example, a good deal of the forest in this part of the world, and especially you get a little bit higher elevation, was oak chestnut forest, meaning the dominant trees were oaks and chestnut, American chestnut. Early 1900s, people bringing Chinese chestnut trees over from Asia, and turned out they had a fungal disease that the Chinese chestnut tree was used to and was able to resist. The American chestnut was not. And so chestnut blight wiped out most of the eastern North American chestnut populations, what used to be a fairly dominant species. Of course, there's a challenge. What do we mean by natural? After all, people are a part of life on Earth. We're not completely unnatural, but also, what are we trying to get back to? Are we thinking what it was like in 1800, in 1600? in 1600 BC, you'd have different conditions at different points. What can we aim at? Again, invasive species, bringing species to areas where they're not native, can upset natural balances. If they spread on their own, they're known as invasives. In a new area, they often have fewer parasites, diseases, predators, things like that, less competition than where they originated. Generally, this is due to human action, although, yes, species do have some degree of dispersing. You do have species spreading without human involvement over geologic time. But there's a whole lot more and much more dramatic jumping around due to human action than would be the case just without us. Okay, so say we've got a plant. Hey, it looks great in the garden. But does it spread out of the garden and cause problems elsewhere? We have things such as wisteria. Pretty purple flowers, smell kind of nice, but they can grow all over the place, take over, compete with native plants. Kudzu, likewise. It was supposed to be helping control erosion by growing over bare dirt. Actually does not do that very well. As a vine, it kind of roots here and there and does not hold on to a lot of ground. But it covers over things. It's a problem. Rats. Native to Northern Europe and Asia. Nuisance all around the world. They've been accidentally brought along with people. Here's an example. All of these here are zebra mussels. Zebra mussels are native to Central Asia region, but they were accidentally spread into the Great Lakes, probably a ship that had picked up water as ballast to help stabilize it way down the bottom as it came across, and then got here and unloading and changing cargo, dumped the old water, picked up new, and in doing so also dumped all the stuff that was living in that old water. And so zebra mussels first found in Lake St. Clair and spread throughout the Great Lakes into the Mississippi system. They are widespread now in North America, and a big nuisance. They grow attached to things, and for one thing, they're very effective filterers, so they gobble up plankton that other things would eat. They're kind of sharp, so much less nice getting in and out of the water for swimming when you've got zebra mussels all over the place. Here we have these zebra mussels are attached onto a native three-ridge mussel. Not very closely related, doesn't do the attach all over to things type of approach. This poor mussel is going to have a hard time even opening and closing its shell, and if it can get its shell opening, tries to pump water through. Look at all the other males that have got a shot of that water first. So if it doesn't starve by being stuck shut in its shell, it's likely to starve through competition. So zebra mussels, not good for the native mussels or many other native species.